Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening with André Aciman and Dani Shapiro to discuss Homo Irrealis essays published by our friends at Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. It seems just like yesterday when André was speaking to a sold-out crowd at our Coral Gables bookshop, and Dani Shapiro, too, with a launch event for Inheritance. Welcome back, dear friends. Thank you for being with us tonight. André Aciman is the author of Find Me, 8 White Nights, Call Me By Your Name, Out of Egypt, False Papers, Alibis, Harvard Square, and Enigma Variations, and is the editor of the Proust Project. He teaches comparative literature at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Dani Shapiro is the author of the instant New York Times best-selling memoir, Inheritance, which was published in January 2019 by Knopf. Her other books include the memoirs Hourglass, Still Writing, Devotion, and Slow Motion, and 5 novels including Black and White and Family History. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of Homo Irrealis from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Welcome, André. Ooh. We have a problem. Yes. So can you both check? Dani, are you sure you don't have any open tabs on your computer, right? Nope. Sounds like we've got that problem. There.
Are we okay?
Nope. Nope. Do you have any open tabs? Hang on. Oh. Let's see. Hi. Are you there, André?
I am there.
Okay. I think it's on Dani's end. Let's see. She comes back. Hi, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us. Hi, Dani. Hi, Dani. Okay, I think we did it, right?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And am I no longer, no one's frozen and no one's ears are hurting?
No.
You're fine.
Okay.
Hallelujah. Okay, well, welcome to the virtual stage. Oh my gosh. This virtual landscape. Oh, okay.
Never a dull moment. André, it's so good to see you. I wish we were doing this in person and not just with our bookshelves side by side on Zoom. And
Look at them, yes. We probably have the same books, too. Anyway, it's nice seeing you again, Dani.
I just want to welcome everyone and also say that Books and Books is very dear to my heart, and I'm sure to yours as well. It's just one of the most wonderful bookstores in the country, and it's a treat to be with you even virtually. I so love this essay collection. I spent many incredibly rich and pleasurable hours just anticipating this conversation and reading these beautiful essays, and I have a lot to say, but where I really would love to begin is with Andre, with you reading from Sloane's Gaslight, which we both arrived at independently as what would make sense to read to kick off the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is about it. I'm sorry we can't post a picture. I thought we would have been able to, but it's a picture of Greenwich Village in 1922, done by John Sloane, and you have an L, and then there's a train on it, basically it's going at top speed. And so I was mesmerized by this picture because there is nothing left of the L on 6th Avenue. So that disappeared. So I'm always considering and always obsessed with the idea of something that was there, that stopped being there, and that I want to have it come back again in some way. So let me read. Much as the passage of time changes almost everything, the stores, the clothes people wear, the kind of vehicles parked alongside the curb, some things remain constant. It is never clear whether it is permanence or change in these contrasting pairs of photographs that I long to grasp. There are usually photographs of the here, the now, and the then. That's what I'm referring to. I'm sorry. Okay. If part of me longs to live at the beginning of the 20th century, another is grateful I'm stuck in the 21st. If part of me loves the present, another yearns for the past. I am confused, but I can't let go of these double images. I am constantly looking for the right coordinates in time and place. The more I stare and flip back and forth between centuries, the more I realize that I don't really know where the real me lives, in 1921 or in 2021, or is there some kind of ideal point forever hovering between the two that is my true spot, except that I never find it. Nothing corresponds to what I think I want. I am a free-floating prisoner of endless double takes. And perhaps it is not so much the old city that I'm seeking in Sloane's city, or another time zone, or just some form of time tourism. What I may be seeking in these paintings and images of a bygone world is just me. Where am I? What am I? And since we're asking, who am I? If I keep staring at Sloane's century-old portrait of 6th Avenue and 3rd Street in the evening, will I spot myself? Or better yet, a far earlier version of myself ambling along the gaslit avenue? And let's say if this gentleman crossing the street on his way home is my great-grandfather, can he see me staring at him? Does he know me? Does he know I am trying to connect? Is he interested? Does he want to know me? Who has his feet more firmly planted on the ground? Or let's turn it around and give this thought a further torsion. When 100 years from now, my great-grandfather looks at a picture of me as I'm sitting by the Statue of Memory on Strauss Park on 106th Street, will he even know that I existed once and that in that picture an infinitesimal part of me was already desperately trying to reach out to him? What we're looking for when we're trying to grasp is not there, will never be there, yet looking for just the thing is what makes us turn to art. Art, as we attempt to understand our lives, ourselves, and the world around us, art is not about things, but about the interrogation, the remembrance, the interpretation, perhaps even the distortion of things, just as it is not about time, but about the inflection of time. Art sees footprints, not feet. Luster, not light. Hears resonance, never sound. Art is about our love for things when we know it's not the things themselves that we love. That's it. So,
thank you. The word that keeps on has kept on coming up for me again and again in reading these essays is that the experience of reading them is profoundly enlivening. There's this sense of, you being in dialogue with other artists and writers and with the past and the future, and this longing that actually feels like, there's this elusive sense that all of us are always experiencing, whether we realize it or not, for, sort of inhabiting the present. And yet the present, as you elucidate it in this book, is not present. I mean, what is alive are all of these layers. And if I may, I just want to quote a few lines of yours back to you. It's from the end of the essay, Elsewhere on Screen. All great art invariably lets us say the same thing. This was really about me. And this, in most cases, is not only a consolation, it's an uplifting revelation that reminds us that we are not alone and others are like us too. I couldn't have asked for more. And I read that and I underlined it because throughout the book, but in that essay in particular, I was having that experience as the reader. I was having the experience of, this is me. In this essay, it's the year 1984, and you're walking through New York City after having just watched the Billy Wilder film, The Apartment, and you're looking for the world of 1960 that was in that film, and you're not finding it, of course, but you're searching for it, and you walk into Shakespeare and Company. And at that moment, Shakespeare and Company, for those listening or watching who don't know, is still a venerable bookstore, but the original Shakespeare and Company was on 81st and Broadway. And I, as a young writer in New York in 1990, it was the first reading I ever gave from my first novel. And I remember walking down Broadway so utterly terrified and exhilarated that I was going to be reading at Shakespeare. And Dan Halpern introduced me, and it was like this moment for a 27-year-old writer. And then it was gone. And I've watched over the years as it's become, I think at one point it was a Cosmetics Plus, and then it was, it's been a number of things, but that I had this sort of meta experience of reading this essay of you in 1984. I mean, there are many layers to it, but you in 1984, longing for a New York that you didn't know in 1960, but longing to inhabit it and feeling that it has already slipped away. You walk down the heavily gentrifying Columbus Avenue. This is in 1984. And just to think about this, and then there's a layer in the essay of essentially the André of today. There's a passage of just listing all of the cinemas that are gone.
Yes.
So it was just, I wanted to open our conversation with that because it was so, it felt so much like exactly what you're doing in this book, that I was having that experience of longing for the moment that I was in, even as I was in it, or also missing that young woman, and wondering always whether she's still there, or where the intersection of all these things is. So what I would love for you to talk about, because it's such a what's the word, provocative idea, is, and the title of the essays comes from. Could you talk about the Irrealis mood? And you write about it in the opening, and it informs the entire the entire book.
Yeah, but I'm glad that we coincided in basically in that particular bookstore. And what I try to do, and maybe I should say this before I describe what Irrealis is. What I try to do in everything I write, it could even be a book review. It doesn't matter what I write. Fiction, nonfiction, memoir, essay, whatever. It really does. Once you're a writer, you're a writer. You do anything. And my feeling is that I'm very bad at plot. I'm very bad at facts. I hate facts. I don't even name my characters sometimes because I can't come up with a name. I don't want to be bothered. These are factoids. I let other writers deal with facts. I'm not interested in, I don't even know how to do plot. So that's why all I focus on, and I know I focus on, is what goes on in your head, what goes on in your soul, rather, because that's really what I'm interested in. So if I say something about my soul, my walk on a lonely street in the wintertime, wherever it is that I am, it could be in Italy, it could be St. Petersburg, it could be in New York. All I want to do really is tell you what are my thoughts or my imaginings or my ruminations at that moment. And if I'm honest enough, then I am sure that you will have connected with me. That's what I'm after. In other words, if I tell you something that's so, you can't believe he said this, it's so bold, it's so sexy, it's so whatever, I'm saying it because I know you're going to say it too. You've experienced it too. And if you haven't, you will. It's my thought is always that whatever I divulge about myself, the very private things about myself, we've all done it. We've all been there. We all understand. And most of the times is whenever I say something like that, people say, you know, I've known this all my life, but I've never thought about it. And I'm doing the thinking for it. So when I speak about the irrealis moods, these are moods that are not in the present. They're not in the past. They're not in the future. There are the might have been that never quite happened, but might still happen. But we want it to happen, and yet we at the same time we fear it would. And I can go on with that sentence. In other words, the clauses just coagulate on one another, and the idea is that none of us, I mean, we all say, I'm in the here and now, I'm in the present tense, I live for the moment. You know, that's all baloney. We don't. I think we all are in some slightly slipping into the past, but not the real past. And or we slip into the future, but it's not the real future. I also believe that our fantasies that we had 10 years ago and never took place, they still exist. They have a memory too. You have a memory of your old fantasies. They're as real now as your memories of real events. And you carry those. And we have sort of layers of these things on us, which is why I was always interested in the city of Rome and how Freud sees it, because he sees that as a construction of layers. And those layers are not sort of one on top of the other, sort of chronologically. They're sort of constantly shuffling about, so that you have the top layer may be the most older and the bottom one is the newer one, but they'll switch again. So I think that in a sense, all of us, all human beings, are having difficulty living in the present tense. We have wonderful moments in the present tense, say a dinner with friends, as we've had in your house, okay? You have a wonderful meal, but as you're eating the food, you're saying to yourself, God, next year I'm going to have to remember this. But as you're saying that, you're already stealing from the present and lodging it into the future so that you can come back to it as a thing in the past. You're playing all these games. Of course, we don't do it methodically. We just slip back and forth constantly. And that's what the book is about.
And that is what it is to be human. And it strikes me, I have a long time meditation practice. I sit down for 18 minutes every morning, 18. What I've come to understand over the years is that it's not about forcing myself into the present moment. It's about watching. It's just about watching the mind as the mind does what the mind does, and that in fact is the meditation. And I found myself thinking about that. I also, you brought up your writing about Freud. I had not known that Freud had a Rome phobia. I just found that like just wonderful and so complex. But you weave it into, I said before, the dialogues that you have with art, and in particular in one of the essays that in which you delve into Freud quite a bit, into being in Rome and revisiting the statue, the Apollo.
Yeah.
What's the Apollo with the lizard?
Yes, it's Saurochtonos.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's a, for reasons that people really must read the essay to discover, it's a work of art that has a lot of resonance and meaning for you, and you make a point to go back to the Vatican museums, and you have a dialogue that I just loved with an imagined dialogue with the Apollo, who's talking back to you about yourself and about your fantasies and about Freud, and you ask him whether he remembers, that perhaps there was this, this gentleman who, that was the place where it became sort of dramatized the most. In most of your other dialogues with the work, it feels like it's like in your essay about Sebald, which is one of my favorites in the book. You're interrogating the work, but in a certain way, it doesn't become this, this.
Oh, personal, you mean?
Yeah.
The other dialogue that I have in the book is the one where I look at a picture of me at the age of 14. And of course, this boy that is in the picture is basically in Egypt. He's still me in Egypt. But he stayed in Egypt. That's what I'm trying to say, is that the me that basically you see here is not the complete me. There's another me who is basically stuck in Egypt and happy to be in Egypt and is wondering, why didn't I take him with me? Or why don't I go back? And there's another me who's sort of also stuck in Rome, and I'm also stuck in Paris, as it happened. So I'm a bit everywhere, and these characters exist in different time zones, and they're trying to reconnect, or at least that's what I want them to think that they're trying to do, because I'm trying to get a sense of who I am. Where am I? At what times? In what time zone do I belong? There's Greenwich time and there's Eastern, whatever it is, and basically you find yourself sort of straggling so many things. And I think, but again, it's not because I've lived in those different cities. It's because we all are. Even when you move from one apartment to another apartment, from one building to another building in the same street, you still have it. There's a remnants of you, a sort of a part of you that has stayed in the old apartment.
Yeah.
And I always ask this question because it's so perverse of me to do this, but I always ask people, how many of you have called a telephone number that used to belong to you? Mm. In other words, everybody does. Everybody has tried to call their old phone number. What do you expect to happen? That you will pick up the phone? No, because you're the one calling. Mm. But we have these ways of sort of slipping out of our time zone, of ourselves, of our lives, and finding out and trying to be somewhere else. So I always have this image of the other bank. In other words, you're living on one bank of the river, and across that bank, there is this other life that could have been yours, that might have been yours, and could still be yours.
Yeah.
But that you really don't want it, but maybe you do.
Yeah.
And you can decide. Anyway.
This reminds me of, I'm sure you know the poem Could Have by Wisława Szymborska.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I found myself again and again thinking of it as I was reading. It could have happened. It might have happened. It happened farther off. It happened, but not to you. You know, it's I often when I teach writing, I will sometimes give my students an exercise I read that and then I ask them to write what could have happened, what could have happened but didn't. So I want to ask you, because we're having this conversation in such a very strange way, in a very strange moment, that it's been a stretched out ongoing moment for these past 10 months. And I was thinking about, really, even though this work is, it's profoundly internal and we're entering a consciousness, that's what your work is, as you said, whether it's your fiction or your memoirs or essays. But at the same time, it depends on, it seems to me, it depends on motion. Like you're on the subway a lot, or things happen because you're out and about. There's the sense of encountering a work of art, like how you seem to be saying, and I loved this, and it really made me think about it, that when and how we encounter a work of art is going to inform the way that we read that work, the way that we enter it, as with the Sebald, the way that you first encountered him. You would have encountered his work in some other way and read it in a different way. So I just wonder what these 10 months have been like for you in terms of probably having to be even more, be internal, not be on planes and on subways and in museums and in what happens when the things that feed the work. Do you have enough stored to not have to grapple with that? It's something that I think about a lot.
You do. I don't actually. I still think that something comes. It comes. It's not necessarily. Basically, you hear a little tune. It's not the tune that you want to hear. It's what it means to you. And I mean, just to go back to something you said, because I do believe that how we approach a work of art is not an incidental factoid. In other words, how we approach a work of art. Who were we with when we saw this statue? Who were we with when we heard this opera? Okay, what were we wearing? These incidental, stupid things that have no bearing on the work of art are part of your response to the work of art. And therefore, when you're going to write about that work of art, you don't have to ignore, you have to camouflage it somehow, but you cannot ignore what brought you to that work of art. So that when I speak about Pessoa, I speak about this man who's painting Jesus and Judas. And when I write about Sebald, what I'm trying to do is tell you that this author was presented to me by the chairman of my department one day. And because he had lost his father, and his father had married a woman that he used to date before either of them got married, okay? So why is that relevant? It is relevant in a creative essay. It also can be a good piece of criticism, but essentially the shoehorn that got you to a work of art is not incidental. It is part of who you are. And if you are writing about something, you're writing about your response to Cavafy's bed, because he writes about his bed. And so you're constantly bringing in yourself. You don't want to sort of throw yourself to the reader, because that's not good criticism. But nevertheless, you cannot ignore it. And so when you talk about COVID and our spending all our time inside, we still read, we still watch movies, we still think, we hear music. We're lucky in that sense. And occasionally we speak to people. We have these sort of Zoom parties where we all sort of have a drink with our best friends, and we enjoy those. I mean, we all did that. In a sense, I'm going to add something that's just going to sound horrendous, but unless you have had some tragedy in your life, and many people have had tragedies in their lives because of the pandemic. But for those of us who have not, or who have basically avoided it so far, as I like to say, because you never know, these are going to be memorable moments too. This is what happens, is that the tragedies that occur in our lives sometimes become sort of acquire a luster of their own. It could be, I said it was a horrible thing to say, because some people may never want to remember this time in their lives. But for me, I mean, here, having this conversation on Zoom when we would have had to go to Florida and move it to the store and go to the hotel and the whole thing, having this is actually quite magical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know just what you mean. And there's actually this moment where you quote Virgil, and it's perhaps the day may come when we shall remember these sufferings with joy.
Yeah.
And of course there are people who are suffering who are never going to remember anything about this time with joy. But that feeling, I remember looking at my son Jacob, who was back from college and living under our roof and having dinner as a family 7 days a week. And at a certain point, I had that thought. It was as if I was looking at this experience from a distance in the future. And I felt with this pang that I was practicing nostalgia for it, to use your phrase, as I was in it.
As you were in it, yes. I remember that in 1956, when my family was basically threatened, they were going to be kicked. Many members of the family were kicked out of Egypt in 1956 because there was a war. But because of the war, the whole family congregated in a huge apartment. And you know what? They were all terrorized. They all had a little suitcase ready if they had to leave. So it was traumatic. But for the kids, it was a holiday.
Mm.
And this is what it is. And of course, I have wonderful memories of those horrible days. And I think that happens in life as well. So we're already storing for when we'll be back. I hope that things go away, that the pandemic disappears. Nevertheless, it sort of hovers. And I can't say that people are miserable because they can't do anything. And at the same time, for a writer, we have to be honest, for writers, this is wonderful because we're forced to do what we thought we would like to do in our free time.
Right, it's so true. Before we open it up to questions, I wanted to talk a little bit about another one of my favorite essays, which is Beethoven's Soufflé in A minor. Early in the book, you reference Julia Childs and the making of a soufflé as being sort of a metaphor for the Irrealis mood, or for the way in which everything is folding and folding and folding. And I was so pleased to come back to it at the end. And in this brief essay, you kind of like what the various works of art that dance together in that essay are the Dead, Beethoven's. Actually, I want to look at it for a second. There's this one, because I'm sure that there are writers who are listening and watching us tonight, and I just have to say that, when I said that this is an enlivening book at the beginning, as a writer, it made me want to write, and it also made me want to visit or revisit. I texted my husband and asked if we had a particular Eric Romer film, because that's what we're going to be doing tonight. After you and I are done with this, and after we've had dinner, is we're gonna snuggle up and watch Eric Romer. There was just this way in which the entry point to these works of art that you visited made me want to re-enter them myself. But there's this particular line in Beethoven's Souffle in A minor, where you're writing about Joyce and the ending of the dead, and the sentence is, he had the audacity not to give up waiting. And I really just thought every writer should have that emblazoned on a T-shirt. The audacity, it's not even patience, because I don't know any patient writers. It's not like sort of sitting back. It's more like it's just a sense. I read a little bit more from it. Waiting for something to happen, avoiding hasty completion, deferring the period, opening up space for the unknown visitor, trying out seamlessly pointless clauses, provided they adhered to a particular rhythm. This was genius.
I think I was talking about James Joyce.
You were.
Yeah, he's a genius.
Yeah, no, that you were talking about Joyce and the ending of the dead.
Yes.
Yeah. But in this one essay, then within a page we're back to Julia Childs and the folding and refolding layer after layer. Art hopes to restore order on the fringes of chaos. It's just beautiful. Well, if it's all right with you, I think we'll open it up to questions.
If there are questions.
We need to give people a chance to come up with some.
Oh,
but there are a few. One is, do you know the work of Walter Benjamin?
Yeah, I know.
And is it of any influence in your own work?
Absolutely none. In fact, I don't even like him. He's supposed to be sacrosanct. All my students begin their papers with a little phrase by Walter Benjamin, and I just don't like him. I think nothing he ever did was ever completed. Everything is unfinished. Everything is, I never liked him. And I don't think he's that smart. So let me stop there, because I can go on.
Oh my God, yes, you should. This is really interesting. I also I don't know if you know that Roxane Gay, this is completely out there, but her new newsletter is called The Audacity.
Oh.
That is what she has named it. So I will remind people, please, to put in your questions using the Ask a Question button. And I think until we have some more, maybe you want to ask a few of your own, Dani?
I can read a piece from the.
That would be lovely. Yeah.
How's that?
Wonderful.
Actually, Andre, but before you do, I do have a question, which is, which actually has to do with the conception of this book and how it came together. Did you begin with the Irrealis mood, or did you arrive at it through the writing? Because it's such a cohesive group of essays.
I think a couple of the essays were written out of because I was wanting to write them, but I always found that I'm always going to this might have been dimension, and very soon I realized I was going to put together this collection of essays. I wanted to focus on Beethoven, I wanted to go on Proust, I wanted to do Cavafy. All these are people that I adore. And so I was going to just focus, but I said I have to have an entry point in each one, or almost each one, which is fundamentally biographical. So, because I also think that criticism, what we call criticism, is in bad need of reinventing itself. People use now so much jargon that you don't understand a word of what they're saying, because they hide behind the jargon. And I want people to basically look into their gut and say a work of art is always about a human being, or it's about being human. And if we ignore that, then it's all sort of just mental froth, as I like to say. Whereas I think every work of art, if you think even a great novel like Emma, which is one of my favorite novels by Jane Austen, is about the problem of being human. The difficulties in just accepting what you are, or accepting that you're really a vulnerable human being in that particular case. And so you can't ignore that. People sort of go into all kinds of dimensions because they can't focus on what really is happening between two human beings who happen to be in love with each other and don't know how to say it.
And why do you think that is? Is it fear? Is it a lack of courage? What is it that who was it who said, the human heart in conflict with itself, that alone makes good literature? I think it was Emerson. I think
It's correct.
but the move away from that, or the all the padding around that, or all the pyrotechnics around that, why?
I think because people want to be published and they know that this is the dominant voice today. It won't be tomorrow, but today it is. And so basically you belong to this brotherhood of similar thinkers and you write for them, but you're actually writing for 5 people, because nobody reads this stuff. It's illegible, and it's not even well written. Usually it's sort of lambasted with so much stuff that it doesn't make sense. So I try to teach my students, who are basically all PhD candidates, not to use jargon, to say what they need to say, and to be able to look at a sentence by an author and say, this is what I think is going on. Now I have to basically prove it, because there is no proof. But I know this is what the author was trying to do. Now that takes a lot of guts. You're basically going on the ledge, but you might be creating something new that nobody's ever thought of before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so but in many respects, criticism is in a dire place because people are writing a lot of gibberish and it's all getting published. And so you have these mega bibliographies of just junk, because nobody really has the courage to say, I think this is what it is. And I'll prove it to you, and I'll show it to you. And I know it in my heart that it is. Now, let me be really good and tell you how it is.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
You're reminding me of the professor who really taught me how to read.
Oh my
man
God.
named Ilya Wax at Sarah Lawrence, who I didn't know how to read because of a lifetime of being schooled in a particular way of reading that had nothing to do with really reading. And I was taking his 19th century literature course, and he had me every week essentially interrogate George Eliot. What is she doing?
Yeah.
Why do you, how is she doing it? Why do you think she's doing it? What's going on here? Read about the world she was living in. Read the, and to really, not psychoanalyze, but to enter into the dialogue. To enter into the world of that writer and what that writer is trying to do, and how he or she is trying to do it, and what in your essay about Proust, when you essentially unpack what it is, what a Proust sentence is, what he needed to, how it's all about the middle. That was, to me, that kind of deep reading is something that I don't see very much in criticism now.
I think that you said it exactly, and that's what I tell my students, is that you're going to take this course that I'm teaching, which is about X, Y, and Z books, and you're going to learn how to read. You're going to learn how to read. And one of the definitions that I have of how to read is, you remember when you took first aid, you had to feel the pulse of the person, whether they were dead or alive, and they told you to use your index finger, because if you used your thumb, you might be reading your own pulse.
Mm.
Okay, and I say you have to feel the pulse of the writer, and that is by looking at the sentences. Don't use your pulse. You might use your pulse to get into the work, but eventually you have to feel what this writer is trying to do, what this composer is trying to do, and certainly what this painter is trying to do. What is your interpretation of what they're seeing in many respects? And the only way you can do this is by coming close to the body of the author who's been dead 300 years ago and feeling their pulse. If you cannot feel the pulse, don't do it.
So we have a question, another one.
Okay.
Mr.
I'm
this
sorry,
is for you.
I'm very rude to this other person who asked a question about Walter Benjamin, because I don't like Walter Benjamin.
I think that's clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Aciman, I am moved by your work. Your words have a flow of thought. I thought it was singular to the stream of my mind. It is nice to see a reflection in another's world. I wonder, as a writer, do you find the intimacy between oneself and the page corrupted when the work is published? Do you find the intimacy between your poetry, as I find it sometimes, or your work interrupted when published? I'm having trouble putting this into words, but however you answer, thank you.
It's a lovely question. I think that fundamentally, being published, we want to be as intimate as we can with others and with ourselves and with our ideas of who other people are. Intimacy is the ultimate. I think there's nothing better in the world than intimacy. Intimacy with someone, intimacy with a work of art, intimacy with whatever. In other words, getting very, very close, and of course, of dropping our sense of shame and reserve and all these other things. I don't think that being published intrudes on the kind of intimacy we want to have with the reader. Being published means, usually, unless you're very lucky, that somebody is going to look at your prose or your writing and say, you might want to change this. You might want to move it there and do this. Now, if you have a very good editor who uses this kind of surgical approach to your writing, some people find that it's too damaging to them and they can't tolerate it. I find that whenever somebody reads me very well, they will say something like, that was not in your voice. And what you should do is, if you move this paragraph down here and you move the other one up there and you basically cut this one altogether, you might have the effect that I know you're looking for. An editor who does that is priceless, because basically they're listening to who you are and how you write. And sometimes we skid away from who we really are and we adopt another voice, one that is not ours, and a good editor will immediately pick that up. And so the intimacy that you're looking for has been now given to you through the agency of somebody else. Now you're even more intimate. And there are many passages in my work that I have been advised to cut. It's not necessary we get it. It's going to be much stronger without that. And in fact, they were right. Dani, do you agree?
I do. It's the intimacy of that relationship of showing someone your work for the first time.
Oh God!
Right. I mean, it made me want to ask you: do you have early readers aside from your editor before you turn in a manuscript?
Yes, I do, but very, very, very few.
Yeah.
One or two usually.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get tired of my prose, and they say something, like I can't distance myself from who you are, and so I have to find somebody else who
Yeah.
has that requisite distance.
Yeah.
People that we live with, they sometimes find it that I can't hear that voice. That's not the person I know. That's the writer I am, and those are different things, and it's hard.
Yeah, it's so true. I know I'm thinking it's the people who are living under the same roof who often have that response, especially with nonfiction, I find.
Also with fiction. Yeah.
Interesting.
So there's another question.
Okay.
When you are looking at art, is art looking at you?
In a way, let me sort of short circuit that question. Of course, art is looking at you, but one of the ways, sometimes we look at a work of art, let's say a painting at the Metropolitan Museum. You're looking at the work of art and you say, my God, this is absolutely fabulous. This is wonderful. And you basically feel something with the painting, or you feel the pain of the painter when he was painting that, or the joy. However, as you're looking at the painting, there's one question that nobody tells you that you're actually asking. You're also asking, not, do I like it, don't I like it, blah, blah, blah. What you're also asking is, why am I looking at it? In other words, what is it that I want from this painting? As you're responding to the painting, you're simultaneously asking yourself, what is it that I'm looking at? Why am I looking at it? In other words, as you're watching a great film, sometimes you're enjoying it. You're in the movie. You're in the mood for it. You're happy. You're totally sort of what is it I'm trying to say? You're totally bonding with this film, and at the same time, you're also telling yourself, why am I liking this film? What does it mean to me? So as you're experiencing something, there's something intellectual going on simultaneously. And I find that always is the case with me. If I find a scene very sad or very funny in a film, I will ask myself, why do you find it so sad? It's not even real. But I'm moved by it, don't you see? And so we're back and forth with myself. It's always with myself. So does the painting know I'm looking at it? I don't know. But that's something for fiction writers. And in this particular book, I'm not a fiction writer, but almost right.
Andre, that back and forth of why am I finding that funny? I'm finding that funny, or why am I moved? Does that happen for you in the moment, or does some of that happen in retrospect after you're thinking about the experience of having looked at the painting or seen the film?
No, actually, it happens as it's happening. In other words, I'm ruining the moment. I'm supposed to be laughing. I'm not supposed to be thinking. I'm supposed to be almost in tears. Why am I thinking about why am I not in tears, or why am I going to cry? I'm having all this diet. It's all extra stuff. Obviously, if I saw a shrink, he would say, yeah, you're trying to repress something. You're fearing something. I remember the first time I heard a Shostakovich symphony at Carnegie Hall, I wanted to leave. And I couldn't leave because there were two old ladies right near me, and they weren't going to stand up because they couldn't, and I was going to disturb the whole place. So I was forced to stay, and I went to a shrink at that time, and I said, why did I want to leave? He said, because you were scared, because you liked it. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's a decent explanation. I would never have been able to come up with that. Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. But anyway, so that was it.
So, I mean, but like essentially that also means that then we aren't reliable narrators of our own experience to ourselves in those ways, right?
No, because tomorrow I could reread the essay on Cavafy and say, oh, that was total baloney. This is totally wrong. But that is the point, is that it's because we look at people. We like this friend of ours. We adore this friend. We love the company. And then suddenly you turn and you say, I can't stand that person today. And we have this constantly. Everything is always it's all basically everything is fluid. About us, about our response to the world, our connection to other people, our connection to things. It's nothing is ever stable enough for us to say, this is what I believe.
Right. And a lifetime of writing is really sort of the answer to that question, because what you're describing is something that's alive. It's alive and sort of pinned down for the moment in this volume. Right? Like that's the fluidity, that's the souffle, if you will.
Exactly. And sometimes what happens to the souffle, if you bang a door, it just collapses on itself. But we do like the fact that everything is constantly in motion and nothing is ever stable. We believe we want stability, but in fact, most of our mind is erratic and chaotic. And what art does for me, in my definition of art, is it basically takes this chaos and tries to tame it, if only for the few minutes that you see it. And for the few hours that a painter paints his thing, he tames something, and then the next day he has to start again.
Right.
So we'll take one more question. I'll read a comment as well. I loved Out of Egypt, which I read 20 years ago, was so wonderful. And your descriptions of your family were humorous and deep and also sad, like all of the Jewish families who have had to leave their country. That was a comment. Then there's a question. Do you pick the title or topic first and then develop the story?
No, I picked the first line. I pick the first line comes to me. It usually is a sentence that somebody will speak. That's how it comes to me. If the sentence is right, then the character who says that sentence is going to basically flow out of those few words. And from those few words, I will take over and I will sort of explore it for another page if I can. If it doesn't go any further, then it gets chucked and we start again. But it's always been, I start because a spoken sentence has an attitude. And if the attitude is right, then the voice has to complement that attitude. And then we move from there. So I don't have, I never write with a plan. I don't know the plot. That's why I love having written a memoir, because a memoir, the facts are given to you. You don't even have to come up with plot. That's true of you too, Dani, right? I mean,
yeah, it's I remember when I first began writing a memoir, I was struggling because I was trying to write it the same way as I had written fiction. And a friend of mine said, but you know what happened? And I thought, that's true. I know what happened. But then in memoir, then the challenge becomes, well, if I know what happened, I can think of nothing more boring than just going into a room and writing it down. So the discovery is different. The discovery is more, to me, like, well, what belongs to what? You know, what are the subtextual, you know, beneath what I know, rumblings that I'm going to learn by hewing to the story that I know. Whereas, I mean, I'm writing fiction again for the first time in a really long time, and I forgot. I mean, it's you know, it has its own incredible challenges, but I forgot that feeling of the story being about three steps ahead of my pen. You know, the constant sense of there being a current of, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know what's going to happen. Because like you, it's never been about plot for me. So, but can I ask you one other thing about that? So when you say it begins for me with a sentence but it's not always it's not always a spoken sentence. Sometimes it's another kind of sentence. Sometimes it can be a voice. It can be a narrative, like just a first sentence that has something to it, but it's not always something that I'm hearing in a character's voice.
Well, I mean, I understand that, and I mean, there are times when I will begin with a normal sentence, but it's for me, it's always the flavor of a personality. When this character Oliver says later, okay, that's how I started the book. Whoever says later that way, what arrogant, boorish person is that? I want to know more, and who will respond to that? If not the exact opposite. So, Out of Egypt starts with, are we or aren't we? What on earth does that mean? Well, let's excavate it. And we sort of begin the excavation. And I love that part.
Yeah.
Then you have to deal with storytelling, which is also, it's a hard thing. That's a hard part too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are obviously a remarkably deep person, both of you, I know from your writing, but those layers, oh my gosh, so many layers. And I think this conversation was fascinating, incredibly well matched. I wish we could go on and on, but but we are coming up on the hour. So I want to thank you both for joining us, for being with Books and Books tonight, for the kind and lovely things that you said about Books and Books at the beginning. I want to remind our viewers that you can order a copy of Homo Irrealis just by pressing the green button at the bottom of the screen, that we will ship it right off to you. You can come by one of our stores for curbside pickup if you'd like. And that it is, certainly a book that you will want to add to your collection. And yes, as you were speaking, I took a few photos of the screen.
Uh-huh.
And I was also thinking, I am going to remember this. And I took so many notes of the things that you were saying that are just so haunting and beautiful. And I will remember this as something that I can't, just that, again, that fluidity. See, I don't know what I'm saying, but basically there will be that haunted quality. And I think that is the silver lining that you were talking about with the pandemic and these conversations. There is an intimacy that perhaps is impossible when you're in a huge, crowded auditorium. So anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you. And thank you so much. Come on, let's see each other. We have to do
this. Or at least a Zoom cocktail or something.
Okay, fine. We'll say hi to Michael, would you please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stay safe.
You too.
You too. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.